Good morning, Rob.
Good morning, Josh. How are you today?
I'm doing okay. How about yourself?
I'm doing very well, thank you.
You're excited to take off for your fishing trip.
And very hopeful that we get to take off. Watching the river levels with some anticipation.
Is there a point at which you make the call?
They will probably make the call for me, and yes, there is a point, and it's rapidly rising towards that point now.
By they, you mean the people getting you to this remote location in
The
Alaska.
pilot, yep.
Well, that actually adds some more excitement, I think. Almost like the anticipation, right? Not knowing.
Right,
You're like
yeah,
a
for
gambler
sure,
at this point.
for sure. As I explained to you, it's just a two-seater plane, and it lands on a gravel bar in a river, and so if the river level goes up, there's no gravel bar, and the plane can't land. They call the tires on the plane tundra tires, and so then they can't get me where I wanna go.
Hmm. The anticipation that you feel might echo some of the anticipation for back to school
Yeah,
that kids in our
absolutely.
congregation are feeling, and that maybe parents are also
Sure.
feeling. People are excited, and you could see that this Sunday. There were a ton of people there, a ton of people excited.
Yes, there were. It felt good, and it was a great sermon. I've heard that from a number of people. I certainly enjoyed it. Told an excellent story, good enough that if we hear it again, I don't think any of us will mind.
Well, my story or the Joseph story, right? Like
Both, I
a
mean,
lot of
really.
one of the comments I got was someone saying, not the story about my childhood, but about the Joseph story, that they said you were such a good storyteller that it was the biblical story that stood out to them because they'd never heard it presented that way.
Ah,
So I
yeah,
think that,
sure.
like, my story may or may not have been great, but I think sometimes the biblical story is phenomenal, but it requires someone to tell it like a story rather than, I think it's all too common. And look, I love the lectionary. I've said that on the podcast, but maybe it's all too common for us to get used to reading the Bible in small snippets rather than
Yeah.
sitting down and reading it like a very, very good, like the good story.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't realize it till I did a little research on that myself, that the Joseph story is found in, like, 14 chapters in the book of Genesis, and we get, like, 39 verses read on a Sunday morning. So if all you're hearing is Sunday morning lectionary, you only hear the tiniest bit of the Joseph story, and the
Yeah.
Joseph story is a compelling story.
I think we just get the beginning,
Yeah,
right? Which is what we got last week. And then we got this week, which is more or less the
the end.
climax and the end,
Yeah,
right? And now I think next week we might be on to
we are.
Exodus, the beginnings of
We
Exodus.
are.
We
So all that
miss
good stuff that really gives, when Joseph says, you guys meant this for harm, but God meant it for good. All the stuff that goes into that, we miss most of it.
Yeah.
And I was glad you told that. I mean, when I said the story was good, I meant the story of you running away as a child.
Sure.
But certainly the Joseph story, I was glad you told that story, because that's an awesome story.
The point obviously being that love is more easily seen in action than
Yeah.
it is in abstract.
Was there anything you left on the cutting room floor on Sunday morning that you thought, gee, I just really wish I had time to say that?
No, I mean, I think I said about what I needed to say. I think I would have maybe gone on a little bit more about the action abstraction, the idea with like love being sort of something we say sort of cheaply. When I walked away from the sermon and I thought about not necessarily even my story, but I came away just thinking about my own kids. And
Sure.
I mentioned that in the sermon.
Yep.
But I think it stuck with me because it's just so common for us to say things to people or to a spouse. You hang up the phone. Oh, I love you. Bye. And there's not the action to follow up. And life happens. You get busy. But I think it's even more important to be intentional as life gets busy to make sure that we have those habits of love in action. And the same, you could argue, applies to our love and worship of God.
Yeah, for sure.
This was a conversation I had with someone this week about whether church ought to be convenient or whether it needs an intention and a habit, and whether or not a commute to church is part of church itself rather than just being an inconvenience you have to sort of suffer. And I think with love, there's an element of, yeah, it's difficult to put time aside to call the relative or the friend or the spouse, to buy flowers on the way home, or to, think of that special Christmas gift. Those do take work, and that's part of it. And in a weird way, we all know the automation of those things, rather than making the world more and more full of love, it cheapens it.
Yeah. Right.
We're all so used to getting Christmas cards, and that's great. Technology has made those a lot easier to mass produce,
Mm-hmm.
but it's also somewhat cheapened it because we know that it took a lot less effort to send 100 cards out than it would have in the old days
Sure.
when you didn't have, the ability to go online and mass print out, the addresses. In fact, it just reads your address book. And I don't want to, I mean, to be honest, even getting a physical card these days is a really nice surprise.
Yeah.
So I'm not knocking it. Like
Right.
I love getting Christmas cards.
Yeah. You and
Send
me
me your
both.
Christmas cards
Yep.
because I think that is something tangible that we don't see enough of. But even that is a lot less effort now than it used to be. And so there's always those questions of, I don't know what the right balance is. Yeah, it's not like it should always be inconvenient to tell someone that you love them or to show them that you love them. But I think maybe it always needs to be intentional.
Inevitably, love is going to involve friction. Friction's the new word.
Yeah.
But I think love inevitably, not all the time, but certainly sometimes involves friction. And I think what we are increasingly aware of, and again, I see this across domains and fields, is people becoming concerned because all of our modern conveniences, and particularly AI really ramps this up, is it takes all the friction out of our lives.
Yeah.
So we lose that basic capacity to engage and endure friction. And then when we lose that, we lose the ability to love well.
Yeah. I'm reading a book right now that someone gave me for my birthday last week called Saturday, 3 p.m.
Oh,
And it is, or 3 o'clock, I guess,
Uh-huh.
3 in the afternoon. And it's about in English soccer, the traditional kickoff time
oh,
for a soccer game
okay.
is at 3 o'clock on Saturdays.
I didn't know that.
And that has been completely demolished by increasingly lucrative TV contracts. And the
Oh.
broadcasters, at least for the top league, want to space all the games out because they
Ah.
can make more money on the broadcast that way.
Yep.
So this guy wrote a book, his name's Daniel Gray, wrote a book not intended to be nostalgic. It's intended to be, we all know we've lost something, but what do we still have in the
Ooh.
game?
Ooh.
Sort of a positive side. And it's great. I've loved it. It's just 50 little essays on the game of soccer.
Wow.
And so many of them, right? Each of these 50 things that he loves, so many of them involve friction, like
Ah.
things that are inconvenient, right? So one chapter that I loved was the club shop, right? This is the shop at the stadium that sells the gear. And if you've ever been to those shops at like any stadium historically, they are a complete mess, right? Trying to buy like a pennant or a uniform, and it's just like they're slightly overpriced. There's not enough people working at the store to like service the crowds that are there on a game day.
Uh-huh.
And he's talking about all the things that happen though when you are in that environment, right? Like this shared experience, the fact that they're trying to like sell the gear that they didn't get rid of last year. He's talking about standing in line and you strike up these conversations in line with people. And all of that would be eradicated in a more efficient shopping experience.
Sure.
The fact that they still exist, at least in some stadiums throughout the UK, he's relishing in like, this is one of the few ways we actually can experience the way that shopping for other things kind of used to be
Oh, how
in the old
interesting.
days. And like just that communal atmosphere of everyone here in this shop kind of has one thing in common. They're trying to support this team, but they're also strangers and incredibly diverse. And there's just, and every chapter is a different twist on basically this theme, which
Alright.
is that you take for granted all of these beautiful points of friction throughout our lives. Another great example is like the regular pub that they would meet at before the game, and they all know that better pubs with better beer and better food have opened since this one. But this one is the one by the stadium that everyone meets at. And then
Yeah.
you sort of learn to love that friction that builds up. The slow service gives you a time to talk. And
Yeah.
I think if we're willing to recognize that in something as trivial as a sport, then surely something like that applies to church,
Yeah.
to our worship of God,
Yeah.
and also to our relationships with other people
Yeah.
that we should be cherishing when we're stuck in traffic with our family rather than ruining the fact that we have to spend another 15 minutes in a metal cage with them. it's food for thought.
It is, and in fact, I think our good friend Søren Kierkegaard told a story about that, and sort of to your point that often it's stories that stick with us rather than didactic or spelling it out. But he tells the story. He says, "Consider the man who calls his wife or his lover or whoever it is, and he says, I'm just sitting at my desk, bored to tears. I don't have anything else to do, and so I thought I'd give you a call and just tell you I love you." What does that mean as opposed to the person who says, "Hey, I am having the busiest day that I have ever had. I'm up to my eyeballs in alligators, and I just don't even have a moment to, even use the bathroom, whatever it is. But you know what? I just wanted to call you and tell you I love you." And you think of the difference between those two. Considerable friction in the one, no friction at all in the other, but it's the one where the person says, "Oh man, all that going on, and he still thinks of me. He must really love me." And I don't know, I probably read that 40 or 50 years ago, and it's like it was yesterday because it just makes so much sense.
Well, the flip side of the story I told about my dad showing love to me by sort of welcoming me back even when my 6-year-old self tried to run away. The flip side is, one of the moments that, and I'm speaking for him, but I think one of the moments in which he knew that I at least valued him a lot. And I know this because I think he's brought it up more times than I have ever. But I remember I had just gotten my driver's license and I rear-ended someone, and very slightly, like one of those. It's not even appropriate to call it a fender bender. There was no bending, right?
I only took out the back end of that car and the headlights in the front of my, but that wasn't bad, really.
It was like it was like a stop and go line at a stop sign. Like I bumped the car at like 5 miles an hour. But I freaked out because I just. Like I knew there's insurance things to be done, and I called him right away. I had my cell phone on me. You could tell that as a dad, he liked that my instinct was to go ask for help.
Sure. Ask him for help.
To ask him for help. And so, to go back to your point, it's like in those moments when push comes to shove, who are you on the phone with?
Yeah.
Again, it's that action. You can say I love you all the time, but when the rubber meets the road, who is actually that person on the other end of the phone with you?
Yeah.
And what does that communicate? That you trust, that you have faith in, that you love them in some sense. So,
yeah. Now you say that, Søren Kierkegaard must not have said, "Call a person on the phone."
Right.
Because they didn't have phones back
No, it was probably
then.
a letter.
But probably a letter. Anyhow, that's how I remember the story.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, we got some questions today. Before I forget to bring those up.
We do, and I think the first one really is going to be in your wheelhouse. So I'm looking forward to hear what you have to say about it.
All right. Do you want to read it for us?
I have to put my glasses on. Can't read without my glasses. In the Apostles' Creed, I always state that I believe on the third day he rose again. It says he went to hell first. But why did it need to take 3 days?
The first thing to talk about
But he is referencing Jesus,
Jesus,
just in case that's not obvious.
Yes, not the other guy who rose from the dead. I think the first thing to talk about is the hell portion.
Sure.
So some translations say hell, some translations say descend to the dead. It's a translation from Greek,
Right.
and probably actually through the Latin, I would imagine, as well. Actually, after that, I'm not sure if our English translation is from the Latin or from the Greek. In any event, it's worth clearing up the fact that the dead, hell, Hades is another translation. They are all trying to give word to, I would imagine, Sheol, which is the Hebrew place of the dead. I think the Septuagint, I don't know off the top of my head what the Septuagint, which is the Greek translation of the Hebrew scriptures of the Old Testament, I don't know off the top of my head how it translates Sheol.
I don't either.
I would imagine it's probably something like Hades. But the thing is, and what complicates this is, once you start using a different word, people import the other connotations and meanings of that word into it. So for instance, Hades in Greek mythology does not look anything like the Sheol of the Old Testament Hebrew conception.
Sure, right.
And I also think that the hell of the modern English translation and all that connotes, usually involving some version of, Dante's Inferno, there's circles of hell and there's people on fire and there's eternal fiery torment.
And a red guy with big horns.
That probably doesn't look very much like that Greek conception of Hades. nor does it look like the Hebrew Sheol.
Right.
So I think what's happening is we are grasping for words we have to give voice to concepts, and then there's some cross-pollination between concepts that is messing this up for us.
Mm-hmm.
The reason I think you see "to the dead" in the modern translation is that that's the important part of what the creed is trying to communicate. It's trying to communicate that Jesus did physically die and descended to the dead. In other words, goes wherever it is that people who die go.
So it's not that he's going to those people that are already dead to preach to them or do some work
Well, I mean,
amongst
there
them.
are some traditions that acknowledge that, and that may be the case. Some of those, to my knowledge, things like the harrowing of hell, which is like this idea that Jesus goes and frees these souls and that are stuck in hell, but who would have believed or were faithful, but weren't able to go to heaven because he hadn't yet died to open that reconciliation between man and God, and sort of brings them up, superhero-like, up and ascends into heaven. That's it's a pretty old tradition in
Yeah. Yep.
in Christian tradition. So it's not like that's a recent innovation by any means, but it also doesn't have a whole lot of biblical support. It has some, and people interpret it some things. Many people might not be aware that many of our, what's the word I'm looking for when you want to talk about things like the spirit? It's angelology, right?
I don't know that I've ever heard of angelology, but that I guess would make sense.
In any event, a lot of our conception of the
Metaphysical
afterlife,
creatures.
of spiritual beings,
Uh-huh.
comes from the Apocrypha,
Yeah.
which, for those who are not familiar, is writings before Christ that Christians have always considered to be some form of scripture, but traditionally were kept out of the canon because they were seen as things that a new Christian shouldn't be hearing every Sunday, things that could be taken out of context. And so they have always had like a secondary status. And
Mhm.
in our own tradition, we will say that doctrine and matters of belief can only be taken from scripture, meaning the Old and New Testament canons, and that the apocryphal books are still God's word, but are in some sense, they're not to be the source of doctrine.
Yeah, not as authoritative.
Not as authoritative for doctrine, but they are useful for teaching, is the way that the 39 Articles, which is the sort of an ancient Anglican statement of belief, put it. So all of that is to say that much of what we believe about what happens after death, or the realm of spiritual beings and angels and archangels and demons, much, though not all, comes from those books. And so because of that, I think from our perspective, from our tradition's perspective, you can have strong beliefs on a lot of this, but they're not mandated. They're not mandatory. There's no right answer, I guess you might say, about what all that looks like. So
Sure.
that's a pretty long preface, but it is to say that I guess we should be careful about importing any particular vision of those things into a question like this one.
Sure.
I think the important thing is Jesus died and went to where the dead go.
Yeah, I like that. Simple, clean,
And this,
and makes sense.
It's funny, we think of it as a modern thing, the sort of wondering of like scientifically what happened when Jesus died, and did he actually die? Maybe he was just asleep, because people don't normally scientifically raise from the dead. We think of that as like a modern thing, but very early on, it was bothersome to people that the Messiah would die.
Right.
And you have traditions that considered themselves Christian that didn't believe he actually died. And so the reason, and this goes for the Nicene Creed that we say on Sundays as well. So whether it's the Apostles' Creed, the Nicene Creed, a lot of what's in the creeds is to make clear certain things that had bubbled up as questions in the first few centuries of Christianity.
Yeah.
And there were people out there who were uncomfortable with their Messiah dying. And it is an uncomfortable fact. In fact, it is one of the reasons historians are so sure Jesus died, probably on a cross, is it would have been so embarrassing for your group's leader to be given the death of a petty sort of rebel whose movement died out and will never come back.
Right.
That
Right.
historians go, that's probably not made up.
Right.
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 I mean, there's other pieces of evidence as well, but I mean, it's not a story that you would make up to grow a movement. So
Right.
I think it's important to focus on the dead part.
Yep, agreed.
What did Jesus do those 3 days? Technically 2 nights, inclusive reckoning. We could talk about that another time. Like, why did it take that long? We've talked about this before. Particularity, the scandal. You could ask why to any number of those things. Why did Jesus come as a Jew in the first century? Some writers have pointed out the symbolism of Jesus dying on a Friday meant he was dead on a Saturday, which is like evidence of the importance of the Sabbath,
Right.
which was Saturday, and God resting.
Right.
Others have pointed out the fact that people coming to the tomb would not have come on the day of rest. They would have been resting on the Sabbath day.
Right.
So Friday's this day of preparation, but the first visitors, when Jesus rises, are coming on their Sunday morning, the first day of the week. They're coming to prepare the body, probably cover it in some spices because it's going to be smelling horribly, those
Right.
sorts of things.
Right.
I don't mean to cast doubt on the fact that it was 3 days, but I mean, nobody would have noticed because
Right.
people were coming to the tomb on Sunday and not on Saturday.
Sure.
So, I mean, there's any number of ways to answer that. Do you have any particularly deep thoughts on 3 days?
I don't. Simple answer is no. I don't.
And there are Old Testament tie-ins, actually. In fact, it's escaping me right now. I'm pretty sure there's one from the Joseph story. Something lasts for 3 days. And I remember my brain going, seen that before. And I can't remember what it is. So you all at home can go look that up. But of course, there's Jonah.
Sure.
Jesus says the sign of Jonah. Jonah is in the belly of the fish for 3 days. And there's the tie-in symbolically to that. There's all these ways in which the Old Testament prefigures Christ. Like, even if it's not a prophecy or a direct prediction, it's still a picture that gives us a way to conceive of what we see in the Christ story. It's like we've seen this story before. It lights up. There's an instant recognition that something special is going on. So maybe God chose 3 days because that was a number that had particular resonance from Israel's scriptures.
Yeah, I mean, I did think of that, but then the question becomes, why did it have particular resonance in Israel's scriptures? And then
It's like asking why the universal constant for whatever gravity is a certain,
Right.
The world is the way it is,
Right.
And maybe one day we will be privileged with the knowledge from God as to why things had to be the way they had to be.
Yeah, 3 days is enough to say that he's really dead. What's the line from Princess Bride? Mostly dead.
Mostly dead.
He's not just mostly dead. You see
Yeah.
Princess Bride?
Yeah. Yes, but it's not on the tip of my tongue.
There's a well-known scene. Well, for people of a certain age, so I guess the younger you get, it's probably not really well known anymore. But where the hero has died, but he turns out just to be mostly dead, and so he's able to bring him back. And
Yeah.
so 3 days is enough to show that he's not mostly dead; he's dead.
Yeah. We have another question.
We do.
Our next question is a little bit of a mystery, which
Yes.
maybe we can pick apart here together.
Yes.
The question is how to use an era. ERA. How to use an era. And I actually thought maybe this was a typo and this was asking for legal advice on how to use an IRA. Something tells me people aren't asking our podcast about their individual retirement accounts.
I'd be the wrong one to ask about that. That's for sure.
So the other idea would be an era, as in an era of time.
Yeah. Yeah. And if we're missing the point and somebody wants to clarify, by all means, clarify for us, and then we can come back to it. I've also heard, and I love this, that people who have been listening have said they've wanted to argue with us at point.
Oh.
And I think that's awesome. I absolutely love that. And so, for instance, I heard that someone wanted to argue, and I think they have a fair point, but that Godzilla is not a monster. Godzilla is a force of nature, and that the whole Toho theory of Godzilla is Godzilla as a force of nature. And if you think about it, Blue Oyster Cult, their song Godzilla, history points out again and again how the nature points out the folly of man. Ooh, Godzilla. So, I mean, I love that people don't just take what we say as the final word, but they think about it more deeply and wanted to argue with us. So anything you want to, argue with us, we'd love to pick that up. If you want to ask further clarifying questions or take things further, we love that as well.
Please do.
I wonder. I mean, I was thinking about this in a strange way about eras, and I was thinking about things I've learned from my garden, and I've learned a lot of things from my garden. I think Jesus learned a lot from nature. I think Jesus learned a lot from agricultural practices. So much of what Jesus teaches on the parable, so on and so forth, really come from his time in nature. So we know that one of the chief ways God reveals God's self is in nature, and that's certainly a part of Jesus' practice. And so I was thinking about how in a garden there are really different eras and how one needs to learn to love the era in which they are.
Hmm.
And so, for instance, in my garden, in some years, there have been a ton of foxes. And, like you, I get up early in the summer. Because I have to get my gardening in before I come into work. As soon as it starts to even have the littlest bit in light, I'm outside at work. So, I'm out by 4 a.m. In when the sun is conducive to that. And I used to see 6 or 7 foxes, 2 families with their kits all playing out there. And I just would love seeing the foxes. And you hear the foxes, screaming, which they sound like they just have
Yeah.
I mean, it's crazy
Yeah.
if you hear like, oh, what the heck is that?
I've been woken up by that before.
Yes. But now, so many of the foxes got mange and they died. And so the fox population has bottomed out. And so now we have this tremendous surge in squirrel and rabbit population.
Hmm.
Well, squirrels and rabbits are not garden friendly.
Hmm.
And I have never had a garden so devastated by anything as the rabbits in the early season of the garden this year.
Hmm.
And the squirrels were heck on my tomatoes this year. So it's a very different era, if you will. It's a very different time in my garden. There's very different features to this. And how do I learn to love this time in the garden rather than just seeing it as a slight, rather just seeing it as an offense, rather than just seeing it as a stain in my existence or whatever it is? So I have no idea what this question is, but that's what it tickled in the back of my mind was this thing that I think God has been asking me to think about, which is how do we love the various eras that we're in? And I think that one of the things that happens for some people as they age, and this won't be relevant to anybody who's not at this point in life, but I think we can love the world less and less because it's not the world we knew and loved as we grew up. It gets stranger, and I've had plenty of people, as they've gotten older and when they've come near to their times of death, to just say, I'm really ready to go because this world is a strange place to me now, and I don't really even like it. I just feel like a stranger in this world, and I don't really even like this world. And I can sympathize with that because there's a bunch of ways where this world as it is right now feels very, very strange to me. And there are aspects of it that I just don't get at all, and some of them feel like an affront for sure. So how do I learn to love this time, right? But whatever stage we're in life, I suppose, if you're in a stage with a young kid and you're not getting sleep, and maybe learning to love that time is every bit as important as if you're at a time, and I'm thinking about this because, if you're struggling with fertility or whatever it may be, how do you learn to love that time? If there's a time where you're struggling with this or that, how do we learn to love these times in our life? I don't know if that's the question, but that's some of what I have felt God talking to me about recently, and it makes some sense to me in that regard.
That makes sense. Yeah. I mean, I don't know that I could add any wisdom to that. It's something that I'm still learning, is looking at life through the lens of eras or seasons and being content with that. There's just going to be different.
Yep.
And how to make the best of each of those seasons
Yes.
is really important.
It is.
So that I can't really add anything other than to say that that's something I'm working on and having to deal with. The one other thing we haven't discussed, but I think if they want us to discuss that, they can just ask this in another podcast, because this might be opening a whole other can of worms, is aura.
Oh.
Is that maybe it was a misspelling. And that is something that is very trendy right now among, I don't know what you want to call it. The old term would have been like new age. These days you might call it alternative spirituality. They've always got the bookstores.
Yep.
And they sell funky books. And I feel like those things go in seasons, speaking of which, right?
Yep.
You get people who
Yep.
are really into healing crystals, people who are into pyramid power, and they go through like a 5 or 10 year thing, and then it falls out, and then it comes back, right? And I feel like auras are very, very in right now. I've had a couple people in the
Sure.
last
Yeah, they absolutely are.
year or two bring them up to me when I went through the first 37 years of my life having never heard of an aura. Um, and so, yeah, but what I will say, both because I am woefully uninformed about exactly what that would mean, and I'd want to, at least look it up a bit, and also because it's probably a bigger conversation. Maybe we can put that aside, and if the people want us to discuss auras, the people can vote.
I like that. We can leave that for another day if that's of interest to folks.
Sounds good. Well, you're going to be in Alaska, hopefully,
Lord willing, and I hope the Lord is.
next week. So we'll have to figure out some other arrangements, but I hope you have a good vacation, and we're looking to seeing you when you get back.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm looking forward to being back and hopefully having a good story or two to tell.
And remember, if you have any questions that you'd like us to answer besides auras, or maybe they are auras, any and all questions, including auras, please
Yeah,
submit them to stmtts.org/questions. We look forward to seeing your questions and talking to you next week.
We do.
Goodbye.
Bye.